Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Bryan from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast, your weekly dose of cybersecurity insights and facts and figures. I'm Bryan Hornung, joined by Reginald Andre and Randy Bryan. What's up, guys?
What's going on,
everybody? So, guys, today we're going to jump into a bunch of ransomware attacks. Number one on the docket is we're going to touch on a ransomware attack we knew a little bit about last week, but we know a lot more about this week. We could say that about the one on the Indian tribe that we covered, because that's kind of impacting people in, I guess, positive ways, I would say, Andre, like casinos are shut down and people can't gamble. But that's kind of how the story's kind of evolving and coming out now. But kind of the bigger story today is this attack on Lee Enterprises newspapers, and it's becoming a bigger story as Randy and I kind of pontificated a little about of how this will affect small communities across the country. So we'll dive into that and give you a little bit more insight into why this ransomware attack is impacting more than just a newspaper operation. We're going to be covering a bunch of other cyber incidents affecting industries from healthcare to steel manufacturing and even government offices, of course. And we'll break down the latest trends, including the shockingly fast pace of ransomware attacks, and offer practical advice to boost your cyber resilience. Stick around as we squawk about security issues that matter to you.
Boom.
Boom, boom. So, guys, Lee Enterprises, this is becoming an interesting or evolving story. I think a lot of it we kind of, we talked about it in a this is what could happen kind of scenario last week, and this week we see that kind of playing out. So what did you guys see across the wire regarding this attack?
Yeah, and Bryan, the article isn't showing there in the iPad.
Thanks, buddy. I forgot to do that.
So what we're seeing now is, last week when Randy wanted to talk about it, we just talked about them being down, but now they're saying it's a ransomware attack. And not only is it a ransomware attack where their data is being ransomed, so to speak, but we're also seeing that there's delays in their business operation when it comes to billing, collection, and vendor payments. And even so, with their operations down, you also have journalists are not able to do their jobs and submitting stories and things like that. So really, it's a trickle down effect from the operations of just paying their vendors to then providing the physical newspapers and the subscription newspapers to their readers.
Yep. So, Randy, any insight that you want to share? Or you good to go?
Yeah, just last week we all may have held out a tiny little bit of hope, thinking, oh, this was just an incident, like somebody got a virus on one of the computers or something, right? But the fact that it's actual ransomware, that adds a lot more understanding, obviously, for us and what we know about this situation, but it also makes us know, included in that, it makes us know that this is probably more dire than we had first suspected. Because when you have ransomware, your machines are locked down. You can't do anything with them. So can you imagine like a whole office, the office that runs, it's like the heartbeat for this whole enterprise, like the whole office, everybody's just walking around wondering what the heck do we do? Can't get on the computers. Creates a huge mess. It's going to affect cash flow. It's going to affect payments going out. It's going to affect people being able to get their work done. This has a massive effect on their business.
And, one thing we always think about newspapers is, your traditional journalist, someone who's actually investigating a story. They may have a scoop on something, or they may have sources. So all of this information is, usually kept digitally somewhere. And the last thing you want is for that to now be compromised.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this, I mean, I grew up in a day where I could remember like every town of any sizable population had like their own kind of independent news organization. As we see, kind of private equity, I'm getting major feedback. Private equity and all these major organizations are now kind of owned by one big conglomerate, and that's kind of what Lee Enterprises is. And instead of it impacting like, hey, small town USA newspaper, it impacts a major organization that is responsible for publishing 77 daily newspapers across the U.S., 350 weekly and specialty publications, and these are across 26 states. So more than half the country gets newspapers from this company. Their circulation is about 1.2 million or 1.2 million households daily, and they get more than 44 million unique visitors to their digital editions, which is, so this is not a small operation here, guys. What are we thinking are the outside? I guess I'll leave it, like, I want to ask you guys like your thoughts on what do you think could potentially happen outside of just like people not getting information and people not getting the news to them. I think of things like people's inability, like if I'm a advertiser in that magazine, right, or in that publication, I rely on that publication to land in people's mailboxes. So maybe I have a tree service or a plumbing service,
Yep.
right? Now I potentially might see less calls over the next couple weeks as a result of this.
Insight.
Right. So this could impact people in a lot of different ways that are yet to be felt, I think, in the economy. Will it put a dent in things? Probably not, but there's probably bigger companies than Lee out there that do the same thing. So it could happen to them and it could have a larger impact.
Yeah, that's really good insight about what you said, because I know, so we get a little newspaper here. I think it's worldwide. I think it's nationwide, called Community Impact, but it's based around little communities. It's all ad driven. And I literally know businesses. I know 2 businesses off the top of my head that do like full page ads in that, and that generates a large proportion of their monthly income. And they're not owned by Lee Enterprises, so that's not going to be impacted here, no pun intended. But there's probably similar newspapers in similar areas where you have people, especially service companies, restaurants, that really rely on those newspapers. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind for me, guys, is simply just this is the second attack on this company. The first attack actually happened in 2020, and it was Iranian hackers that breached the company's network as part of a disinformation campaign before the U.S. presidential election. And that's the other side of this, right? They don't always have to go for the money in the ransomware. They could potentially use these news organizations to push out disinformation to people if they can get things printed. Nobody was aware that an article got changed or something, was published in a way that, people don't know about online. Could happen quickly. And these are concerns that these organizations have to start taking seriously, because that's what's at stake. You could lose business, but you could also potentially aid in other countries spreading disinformation.
Yep. And also a good point is not having that one point of failure. It makes sense nowadays, like you were mentioning earlier, how, these bigger news companies are purchasing all these smaller ones. So you then have only, one IT department instead of having 77 different IT departments in 77 different cities. But this is also a point of showing you where if you have all of these different cities and departments relying on you, you need to make sure that these things are airtight and air gapped. So that way, if something happens to one city, maybe it was someone in the San Francisco office, and I'm speculating, of course, but if something happened in the San Francisco office, it shouldn't have to affect necessarily the Chicago office, for example.
Moving right along, guys. Got this article out of CISO Online we thought was interesting. This ransomware gang extorts victims 17 hours after intrusion on average. Let's talk about this a little bit, because I think this backs up a lot of what I've been kind of out there saying lately, which is on the heels of the report that came out essentially that said ransomware payments have dropped by, I think it was like 35% or something like that. Which isn't the first time we've seen ransomware payments drop, and usually it's not, and that's what I kind of said last week or so on the podcast, and I did I did a separate video on my own YouTube channel about it, and I talked about how the 34% is not unprecedented, a drop like that, and there's usually valid reasons behind it that, you know, the mainstream media and the people that cover this stuff tend to miss or tend to not even look at. And a lot of the stories that came out around the 35% drop were like, hey, like, you know, companies have better backups and they're getting through ransomware events better and easier than they were in the past, so they don't have to pay the bad guys anymore. Great news, pop bottles. That's not what's going on. What we have on the screen is what's going on, right? Ransomware groups are moving quicker, and they're spending less time on companies that want to play games and not pay. And they'll just kind of leave you in the dust and move on to the next victim that they already have who is willing to pay. They don't want to be dealing with people that it's going to take them 4 weeks to get a ransomware payment when they know they can go to somebody else and get it in 2 days. They're already in your networks. It's just a matter of when they want to reveal themselves. And that's what's going on out there. So if they have access to 100 networks, they come across one company, hit them with ransomware, that company doesn't want to pay, or they're playing games, they just move on to the next company and ask them for money. They have 98 more other customers to get through.
Yep. And it really, we say it all the time, it really boils down to the money, Bryan, because you and I know they could get more information by lurking, living off the land, building a giant portfolio of everything. And then when they push the play button, if you will, they have a chance of getting a lot more. But if you can do a quick grab of 95 clients and get 3 to pay, you're getting more money on the over the long haul, really over the short haul. You're getting more money than if you're doing this whole, you know, living off the land and you're around there forever. I'm not saying that the other one is going away. We're still going to see people lurking and living off the land, but they're really, I think, being driven by results, and results in this quote unquote industry or whatever, results equals money, and they're driven by money. And you're right. If they can get people to pay, you know, why wait around for you? And then what is that going to mean? Is that going to mean that some customers are going to have difficulty paying and getting unransomed because they took so long?
And no, it means that their stuff's going to end up on the dark web. That's what it means.
Yikes.
Yeah, it means that, yes, if they didn't steal data, but if they steal data, their data is going on the dark web, and that's what we're saying. They don't care. They're like, all right, we're just going to dump it out there.
Yeah, we used to always say, 120 days is how long they stay in your network until
they're in the network, right? So let me break it down for everybody, right?
Sure.
You have APTs, right? That advanced persistent threats that are in the networks. Those are the guys I'm talking about that already have access to your networks.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the ransomware groups. Ransomware is the service guys. They just go to the APT guys and say, all right, give us access to that network. And once we get in there, we're going to deploy ransomware. So the hackers are still in the network for a long period of time. What has shortened is the period of time from when the ransomware group gets engaged and when the ransomware actually appears. That's what's shortened.
Got it.
So, they're still in there, and they're still, they still have access for a very long time. It's just not, they're not really, they are still digging around. So I don't want to say they're not digging around for information and data anymore, because they are doing that. They're just not sitting there and trying to hit every single machine. If they can get 20%, they'll do the 20% rather than, spending another 30 days to get the 100%.
Yep. Because they can get some money, and they
Right.
can get more by doing that faster.
Right.
Good insight.
And if you hit the right 20%, then your chances of you getting paid are higher, right? Along the way, like, these guys also know that these companies are investing in tools, hiring companies to come in and look for things. And they don't know when that's going to happen either, right? So and we're going to talk about that in another story about detection tools and how good and how maybe not good they are, right? And that's part of this story, right? Is these cyber criminal groups, like, knowing that they're going to trip something up at some point and get found out. So the quicker they can get the ransomware deployed, the less chance they have of getting tripped up without it getting deployed.
Yeah,
that's part of the game too.
Yeah, the article mentioned smash and grab concept.
Yeah. So 17 hours is the average, guys. They're saying some of the better ransomware groups are down to 4 to 6 hours. And that's a notably significant change from just a year and a half ago when attackers would remain in networks for days or even weeks, as we talked about. There's a clear correlation between a group's average time and the number of victims, meaning the quicker they hit them, the higher the victim count is. Groups with the lowest TTR, under 8 hours, saw a significant growth in activity in 2024. So the groups that are really good and really quick are the ones that we know about. Ransom Hub, Lynx, Akira, Play. They're all groups that have worked on this and improved their processes so they can do this very quickly. As you mentioned, smash and grab approach, that's targeting small and mid-sized businesses. They're really not going after the super big businesses. They leave those for Klopp and the other big guys like Black Cat and all those. These groups tend to go after smaller organizations. And again, the affiliates, the APTs, the people who break into the network first, are highly incentivized with high percentages of ransom amounts to generate more payouts. So it's not unheard of for an APT group to get 70% of the ransomware money from these groups. So it's lucrative for somebody to try to break in. But that's the hardest part at the end of the day too. So,
and that's interesting. You say to get the 70%. I would say to businesses, first off, you probably shouldn't be negotiating this on your own. But also, second off, if it comes to that, you need to remember that they're willing to negotiate. They are going to look at your annual revenue, which is easily available online in multiple places. But just know they typically only get 70% of the money. You could probably counter back. If they say $1 million, you counter back and say 500,000, they'd counter back and say 750, and you just saved $250,000. I know that sounds awful, but it may come to that for somebody, right?
Yep, 100%. And then article also goes to kind of back up what I've already kind of pointed out, that the tools, while improving or the adoption of EDR, like tools like EDR, are making it harder for these guys, because the more they call them actions, meaning if they have to do something on your network to get further access, that action could potentially be a tripwire for an EDR tool or a managed SOC if you have somebody with eyeballs on your network 24/7. And those tripwires usually average around 18, but they've seen some groups get down to as low as 6, and some, were around 30. So, but it usually takes them about 18 different tactics or different things to exploit in order to get ransomware fully deployed. That's a lot. I mean, that really is. Like if your team can't detect 18 things that somebody shouldn't be doing on your network, you probably need to look at what you're doing and refine your tools and do better tools. But they are saying like the automated tools, the EDRs and the things like DLP. This article states that DLP services have not helped much in making data theft a more attractive option. So, you know, that is a huge kind of, I think, detail in this article that these DLP tools, you know, a lot of organizations that we deal with at Exact that buy DLP tools are doing it for compliance reasons. They're not doing it for data exfiltration reasons. But you would think if somebody's moving private information off or through your network, these DLP tools would detect that or pick that up. But these DLP tools are either not configured to do that, or they're not able to detect it, and they're not doing a good enough job. I think it's just the way that they're set up today and how they're being used today. They're kind of, I would say it's DLP tools are kind of looking in certain places for certain data, and they're not really looking for like a hacker offloading it. They're more like looking for like a employee emailing a social security number.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Right. So any other thoughts on this, guys? Be interesting. Interesting information in this article. It was a good one. It was out of CSO Online. So let's get into these attacks, guys. Radiology practice, SimonMed Imaging suffers an apparent ransomware attack. Oh boy. Any thoughts on this one before I start going? But this is radiology. You don't want that kind of stuff ending up on the dark web, right, Randy?
That's super high PII, PHI, protected health information for sure. Also, to me, this makes me wonder, okay, they cracked the nut here, and then how quickly are they going to spread to other radiologists, you know, now that they've figured out how to get in here and get ransomware? I guarantee you they're looking at how they can scale this with what they've learned from this first one. And this is also going to be a high probability to pay the money business, because you often have somebody on the operating table, or you have somebody sitting in a chair or whatever. They take the pictures. They need the results back often right away. There are times that they can wait a little bit, or, you know, if they're in the hospital, they can get it this afternoon. But short story long, this is a business that's highly likely to pay. They're not going to mess around and try to, you know, spend a month trying to recover or whatever. They'd lose everything if they did that. They're most likely just going to pay. So that's my insight. So yeah, this is an interesting one. Yeah,
it's interesting. They're saying that no data was encrypted, but that doesn't mean that they didn't steal the data. That just means that the data wasn't encrypted. But nevertheless, they're seeking $1 million in Bitcoin with a deadline of February 21st. I say pay it, give them a tip. Thank you for the President's Day discount, because that's a great deal to get your data back.
Wow, this guy coming on the show saying pay it.
For $1 million? Yeah.
A couple of interesting things I saw on here, guys. Number one, SimonMed says they interrupted the hackers and that no data was encrypted. Yet they took systems offline, resulting in operational slowdowns. They're not saying things came to a crawling stop, but things are crawling nonetheless. Clinical systems were reportedly not impacted by the unauthorized activity. Medusa's claimed responsibility for the cyber attack. They know what they're doing. They posted 45 proof files on the dark web, and they claim to hold over 212 gigabytes of data. There's a ransom demand of $1 million in Bitcoin, and that was reportedly made with the deadline of February 21st, 2025. The demand, not the payment. What's on the line here, guys? As you mentioned, Andre, there's a site called suspectfile.com, and they're saying that Medusa has access to 318,000 lines of data from SimonMed. and sensitive information that includes social security numbers, medical records, corporate emails, and diagnostic images. Ouch, you do not want that. It's going to be ugly. We'll see what happens. We'll keep everyone updated, but that's when this happened at Lehigh Valley Health Network, guys, it did not turn out well. So we'll see what happens. I mean, because look, X-ray or not, if the patient is nude in the image, that's a nude photograph. So that could turn out just to be a bigger fine, bigger class action settlement for this organization when the Shiat hits the fan, so to speak.
Yeah, the article mentions down near the end several others that have been hit in the last couple of years, and one of them was in October, which well, actually, it's before October, but in October they lost a class action suit against them or whatever, and they were ordered to pay $1.85 million to settle that, which, you know, that could be a business ender for some businesses.
Absolutely. All right, moving right along because Randy's got to go to Vegas.
Not Michigan?
Not Michigan. Unimicron Technology, they are a Taiwan-based print circuit board manufacturer, and we like to talk about these because of the potential down the line ramifications that these potential attacks have. And on the 30th of January, the company fell victim to a ransomware attack, and the company, which is one of the world's largest chip makers, with manufacturing sites in China, Germany, and Japan, disclosed the incident on February 1st. And the details that we know about are the Sarcoma ransomware group claimed responsibility. Unimicron's IT systems were targeted, prompting the company to launch an investigation with the help of external cyber forensics group. Initially, Unimicron expected the impact on its operations to be limited, and Sarcoma listed this company on their Tor-based dark web leak site about 11 days later. The group threatened to make stolen data public within a week unless a ransom is paid. That's today. And hackers released screenshots of documents allegedly stolen from the company's systems. And they claim to have about 377 gigabytes of archive files from the company. Thoughts here, guys?
You know, they make it seem like when you use the word archive as of its old stuff, like, oh no, it doesn't matter. But archives, yes, it could be old, but nevertheless, I mean, this is a company that designs these boards. There's all of this intellectual property that you still don't want your enemies to have or your competitors to have. So they kind of did a wordplay there by putting the word archive.
No, for the sake of time, Randy always likes to point out that these types of things are scary from an IT computer architecture standpoint, because everything goes through a chip, right? Pretty much everything you do on a computer goes through a chip. So if you can siphon or steal off that information using one of these chips, or you can learn how to exploit these chips through the information you've stolen from this company, that's no good. So we'll keep everybody kind of updated on this one, but it is a very interesting story that this chip maker is targeted in this ransomware attack. And it appears they are not negotiating because they weren't listed at first, and now they're listed. And it sounds like they're annoying the group that breached them. And it could be that today or in the next couple of days, some of this information starts to spill over on the dark web. All good, Randy?
It's all good.
All right. So let's move on to the next ransomware attack that happened this week, guys. There doesn't seem to be any shortage of them. Virginia's Attorney General's office. I feel like they've gotten hit before. Maybe I'm wrong. But on Valentine's Day, or no, Wednesday. Why does it say Wednesday? Wasn't Valentine's Day on Friday? Well, anyway, on Valentine's Day, they had a cyber attack. sophisticated cyber attack, they're calling it. I always love that. Leading to significant disruptions in their operations. Most of the office IT systems were taken offline, including email, VPN, internet, and website. Employees were directed to return to paper court filings due to the system outage. The agency shut down its computer systems after detecting suspicious activity last week. And officials notified the Virginia State Police, the FBI, and Virginia Information Technology Agency. Both law enforcement agencies are currently investigating the incident. Randy, I'll leave the Chief Deputy Stephen Pop's thing to you. And the Office of Virginia Attorney General Jason Meyers did not respond to requests for comments. And so did the Virginia Information Technology Association. So everybody's being tight-lipped about what's going on here, guys. And Randy, what do we know based on what we know, which is very little, but how were we able to say in the green room, like, wow, their incident response wasn't very well tested?
So I think you had that discussion with Andre.
Yeah, I did. I say Randy? My bad. Got Randy on my mind.
That's right.
Well, I have a few thoughts about this. Is this something like political in that aspect where, maybe something is being investigated and they're trying to grab that data? Or is it just, hey, they had a vulnerability and they just happen to be the Attorney General's office? To go after the Attorney General's office, that's for me, that's not a coincidence.
Why? Why can't it just be a ransomware group that went after them?
Because of all of the sensitive information they have, as far as if they're doing some type of court case or something like that, some type of legal precedent.
It's not the first time we've seen it. We saw it in DC. We saw it in Illinois. And what those cyber criminals did in those cases were they used the information that they found and started blackmailing criminals, cops, guys that were under investigation. They would go to gangs and tell them who in their gang were informants for the police. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff going on from these cyber attacks.
Yeah.
But what did you tell me in the green room that the Chief Deputy Attorney General, when he learned of the incident, what did he do? You said it in the green room. You don't remember?
Oh yeah. Sorry. So he sent out an email. Okay, so first of all, he basically, in this article, it's saying that they had to turn off their IT systems, which included the emails, VPN, and internet access, including their website. But then he said that he notified the employees that they would be down via email. So to me, that didn't make any sense, because you just turned everything off and now you're emailing all your employees the latest update.
Yeah, the interesting thing is just that's indicative of a company that doesn't know their incident response procedure, right? Because that's typically, if your communications are taken offline, you have to have a different way to communicate with people.
Right.
And they just didn't have that either well tested, thought through, planned, whatever you want to call it. That's how guys like us can sit and read news articles and say, they don't have things as buttoned up as they should.
So, I mean, theoretically, what if their incident response plan said, if 365 is borked, we're going to email you from this other email account, and we're going to email all your personal email addresses that we have on file, since we're assuming
that's
that
a legitimate incident response plan.
Right. Maybe they did that. It does say that he emailed them, but it says that he emailed him that the email was down. So it makes me wonder if they had a plan and it was another, like an emergency account, and then they had a pre-built list of all the, internal employees, personal emails to let people know.
It's possible. We're just pointing out that you need to think about it.
Yes.
It's a good example that, like, that's what happens though in events. That's what we see all the time. Companies go to what they're trained to do, what they're used to doing, and it's not available to them, or it doesn't work as intended. And users don't know any better, right? As an IT person, you're like, well, yeah, no kidding, right? But users just don't understand this stuff at that level, right? They understand like buttons, you press them and things happen.
Yeah, or not to get Randy riled up on the political stuff, but recently some people were fired. Some government employees were fired, but it was a mistake. And they apparently had no way of contacting them back to tell them that, hey, we made a mistake, we need you to come back. They only had like their corporate email and corporate cell phone numbers, but they didn't actually have their personal information, which was a little weird.
Wow. Oops.
Yeah.
Oops. Randy, you still good?
I'm good.
All right. Nippon Steel. We like to talk about big things, and this is a big thing in this world. This is the world's 4th largest crude steel producer, and they have fallen victim to a ransomware attack by Bryan Hornung. These guys hit a lot of people too. The incident was disclosed on February 13th, 2025, when they posted, the ransomware group posted Nippon Steel on its dark web leak site. They claim to have about 500 gigs of data from Nippon Steel's U.S. division's networks. And the group alleges to have exfiltrated sensitive information, including accounting data, client and financial personal data, network users' personal folders, files from management PCs, file server data, production data, and personal data. It seems like they got the whole shebang, guys. What are your thoughts on this, and what implications does this have in terms of things like national security or supply chain issues?
Well, this is political because they just did a tariff on steel like a couple of weeks ago. Like I think it was like 25%. On countries steel and coming from the outside.
Right. And I believe, and this is way out of my wheelhouse, but I believe in my limited knowledge of kind of what's going on out there in the investing world, I think this is the company that wanted to buy U.S. Steel. And it was blocked by the previous administration. Yes, I just looked it up. Nippon Steel sued the Biden administration on January 7th, 2025 for illegally blocking the proposal to merger with U.S. Steel.
Yep.
So as of the 14th, guys, they disappeared from Bryan Hornung's list of victims. And the absence has led to speculation that Nippon Steel may be negotiating or have paid the ransom. That's what we tell you on the show all the time. If you're on the dark web leak site, it means you stop talking or you refuse to pay. And when you're not there, because look, there's a lot of times we know companies are hit by a group, but they're not on the dark web leak site and they're not talking. So we don't really come on the show talking about it at all because we have no proof.
Right.
And we're not going to use the sources that we have and out them to bring this to you. If it's in the news or if it's on a dark web leak site, we'll talk about it. And that's what we see all the time. Like we just talked about a story where a group showed up on a dark web leak site almost 2 weeks after they were hit. And that's because they were probably talking, they were probably negotiating, and then they stopped talking. And then they were like, okay, well, you don't believe us? We're going to start dumping your stuff out on our leak site.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wonder if this is related because we looked at that chip maker just a little while ago. That was also Japanese based. We haven't heard, maybe it's just random. We haven't heard a lot of news from a ton of Japanese ransomware. And here now we have 2 pretty high profile. Just makes me wonder, what's going on there. So
I want to say Nippon is Chinese, dude.
That's literally the name for Japan in Japanese is Nippon. Or Nippon, however it's pronounced. Yeah. So maybe they are. maybe they are owned by Chinese. So
I'm not sure.
it
No,
does-
it's Japan. You're right. It's Japan. I just looked it up. Moving right along, we have this one will get your because of your somebody in your family who kind of deals with this, Randy. But this is Bethany Lutheran Church named as victim by Quillen Ransomware Group, and this is just a great example of they don't care. They don't care who they hit, big, small. So this church, let me get you this. So Quillen, they've been around for a little bit, this group, and they have hit this ransomware group, or I'm sorry, they've hit this church in the south of Grantsburg, Wisconsin. So just a small town church, getting hit right around Valentine's Day. Seems like there was a lot of hits around Valentine's Day. And they were posted on the Quillen's site, and then this researcher went to the church and basically said, like, hey, look, you're on this ransomware dark web leak site. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't think we've been hit. So it just goes to show you that, like, these things are happening, and like this church is probably so small that they don't even realize, like, they got maybe a few computers that were hit, or information was stolen off of the computers of the church. But they haven't gotten a reply from the church. This reporter, anyway, hasn't gotten a reply from the church confirming what this Quillen ransomware group has posted on their dark web leak site. So, thoughts here, Randy? Got any insight?
mean, there's a lot of information. Once again, this is a potentially lucrative hit for the criminals because you have donor information, you have personal information, and the churches have to be extra careful because, in the last incident we looked at, the first data they posted was personal contact information of the leaders of the organization. So they'll do things like that. That's called a PSYOP, to put pressure on the leaders. When it involves a church, they'll do things like that as well. Or they may take over the website, post things that the church would disagree with, that could be embarrassing to the church. Like, there's a lot of things they can do to kind of put the screws on, if you will, to try to get them to pay, that we've seen them do in other incidents.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, people donate money to churches, anonymously, things like that. So, Randy, I know you got to run. I just want to blow through the rest of these articles real quick. And
okay, so I'll go ahead and run, and then I'll have a fun rest of your show.
You enjoy.
Right. Don't spend it all in one place.
Stay out of trouble.
Bye, y'all.
Later. So, Andre, we got this Coast Guard thing. Looks like pay has been delayed for about 1,135 members. They basically had to stop paying the Coast Guard because of a cyber attack.
Yeah, this one was sad. You got people out doing their deployments and out, and now they have to worry about their bills not being paid. They're defending our country and also worrying if their mortgage payment's going to go through or whatever else. So, so my son is going into college, and I know that the Coast Guard right now has a. We considered having him join the Coast Guard because they have I think it's called the Coast Guard Cyber Ops is the name, and they have a $50,000 signing bonus that he was looking at. So they definitely need help over there.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me when these types of things happen with, like, people not getting paid, because so much revolves around a typical W-2 worker's paycheck, right? Taxes being one of them. So entities that, pull taxes out and get income from that aren't going to get it, but it also impacts, like, child support, things like that too. Kids don't get the money that they need to live. And I think we've talked about it a ton on this show, and you've said it a lot, is that people live paycheck to paycheck. So when these things don't come through, it becomes a bigger issue than just, words on a page and, a news story. So it impacts people's lives in a big way. So.
Yeah, and last year in April, the Coast Guard Reserve also experienced a data breach.
This was an interesting one. This Barry Dunn McNeil, it's another, it's a Portland, Maine-based accounting and consultancy firm. They've agreed to a class action lawsuit settlement in the neighborhood of $7.25 million following a significant data breach that affected over 1.1 million individuals. Very interesting numbers there, Randy. That's about $7 per record. So it's a very expensive record, right? You have 1.1 million individuals that have trusted you to do their taxes or do whatever with their information. The breach occurred 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago in September of 2023, and it exposed sensitive personal and protected health information of clients, including names, addresses, social security numbers, and medical information. So funny thing is that $7 million fund, Andre, you can get up to $5,000 per documented loss. And we've kind of gone into that, what a documented loss is. So good luck getting all $5,000.
Yeah. It's interesting too here because, it said the reason is for negligence, for failing to prevent. But at the same time, the article mentions that they had a managed service provider, someone that manages their IT, called Reliable Networks of Maine. So I'm sure well, the first part of my point is going back to where people are going to you because they're suing you because you were negligent. There's one thing when it happened, but when you just strictly didn't follow best practices. And then secondly, the fact that they mentioned that they had an IT company tells me that, they're maybe their insurance is covering some of it, or they're kind of passing the blame to say, hey, no, we had an MSP. We did everything they said and we still got hacked. So I'm sure there's more to the story on that.
Probably not the case. They probably had an MSP. And what we usually see going on out there is the MSP is not even having the conversations that need to be had with that company, or the MSP is having conversations with the organization, and they decided not to move forward with the recommendations. Those are usually the two scenarios that play out here. And if the MSP was doing everything that they were supposed to do, and even if they were named in the lawsuit, that's their get out of jail free card, is the evidence that they have to say that we've done everything by the book. And it really is this organization who decided that they didn't want to do things the right way. Could play out, I don't know the laws of the state of Maine, it could play out where this organization has to go through this class action. They can always go and turn around and sue the MSP. But a lot of times what I see out there just in the real world, just talking frank with people, is they just fire the MSP and move to a different company.
Hey, oh man, can you put this on? Let's go over this for a few minutes. I'm going to put it on the private chat. I want you to share the screen on this one.
Okay.
All right, just put it there.
What am I clicking on here? Okay.
All right. So I was curious on the point of why did they mention this MSP company? So let's scroll a little down, and what we're going to read is that they are blaming the MSP, but then, like you said, the MSP is saying no, they never hired us for cybersecurity services.
Right. Where are you seeing that?
Okay, I'm sorry. It's more towards the bottom. It's actually the last paragraph. You see it where it says the last, where in quotes, reliable network is disappointed in Barry's Dunn decision. You see that?
Barry Dunn immediately initiated a response program about third-party cybersecurity experts to investigate and determine extension points.
No, all the way in the bottom. The last
Oh, dude. So it's saying that the hackers gained access to Reliable's network and took some data stored on the HA. So they got in through the MSP.
That's what they're claiming. And then go all the way down to the last paragraph.
Right? That is the last paragraph, isn't it?
But it's okay. No. Okay.
Keeps going.
Yeah. Keep on going. All the way to the last paragraph.
Okay, so Reliable Networks has provided a statement about the unauthorized access and data breach and confirmed that Barry Dunn's systems were not accessed by an unauthorized third party. Reliable Networks is disappointed in Barry Dunn's decision to place blame on Reliable Networks for the events that transpired. Reliable Networks has worked with Barry Dunn for years, providing technology. Did not retain Reliable Networks to serve as its cybersecurity protection prevention vendor. As Barry Dunn states, its recent notice, while performing its network monitoring service, Reliable Networks discovered suspicious activity affecting Barry Dunn's network and promptly notified Barry Dunn's of the activity. However, the data breach did not occur on Reliable Networks' own network, nor its internal systems. Furthermore, none of Reliable Networks' other clients' network systems were impacted by its data breach. That's ugly. I mean, wow. Because they're accusing them of something that some other third party says that this MSP did, or the breach was because of. I don't know how that third party came to that conclusion. And the other part of this is it Reliable Networks can say whatever they want. That, like, they can say, we weren't providing this service to Barry Dunn. We were only providing help desk and patching and updates to cybersecurity, right? And that's what we hear a lot. But at the end of the day, it's up to the MSP to make that distinction and be proactively communicating with their clients that we're not providing this stuff.
Right.
And if you don't have that conversation, it really goes down to what your contracts say and what you're saying on your website. And I've seen tons of MSP's website where it's like, we take care of everything so you can sleep better at night. And when you say those things, you're basically putting yourself in a bad spot if something like this happens, because a lawyer is going to look at that and go, no, you said you take care of everything and you didn't take care of everything.
Right.
So hopefully Reliable Networks has good contracts and they're not over promising on things that they're not delivering on. But that's a risk you take with hiring a company. And I think why you wanted to go kind of down this rabbit hole a little bit is to point out the nuances of this relationship that these companies have with these MSPs. And there's a lot of what I call mutual mystification, where the company thinks one thing, the MSP thinks another thing, and they're not on the same page about what services are being delivered.
Well, remember the FTC safeguard rules. Remember how they said, it's to stop that blame game of one person blaming the other. That they said, hey, you have to assign a person in your company that understands things, so that way you're not doing the blame game anymore.
Right. Well, ultimately, what we're seeing in all regulation across the board is you can't pass the buck to a third party. If you hire somebody to come in and do your cybersecurity, it's on you to make sure that they're doing their job. You can't go, well, they weren't doing their job.
Right.
Every regulation that's being created by our government and by authorities that have the ability to put regulations in place, they all say pretty much the same thing. That you can work with outside people, but you're responsible for what they do. It's no different than if you hire an employee. If you hire an employee, the employee is not personally responsible for your cybersecurity. Like, the company's responsible for making sure that employee is doing his job.
Right.
And that's how it works out. And then for whatever reason, when companies hire outside firms, a lot of it has to do with, again, the company overpromising things they're not doing to make it sound like we're the best company in the world, we want your business, and not being upfront with what they do and actually don't do. And you know through your business, and I do it in my business, that you sit down and you have these conversations on a regular basis with your customers and say, hey, things have changed. There's now this threat and that threat. And guess what? We're not protecting you from those.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not doing that, then you're going to end up in the same place that this Reliable Networks is. Fighting a fight that, that they're going to be severely handicapped in because they just overpromised and didn't have things tightened up enough. And that's the easiest way you can say it.
$7.2 million lawsuit or settlement. So it's not fun, man. And then your name is done, right? You might as well just close up shop, start a new LLC or something.
We'll see. I mean, it's interesting because over the years I've seen plenty of companies continue to stay with their MSP even after they were breached.
Yeah. Okay.
I've seen it happen more than you would think. I mean, yes, people do change, but people also do stay. Because it depends on the personality styles, right? People are afraid of change type thing. All right. Regional Emergency Medical Services Authority recently experienced a cyber attack, Andre, potentially compromising patient employee information. February 5th, the COO confirmed the cyber attack via company-wide letter. The organization's computer-aided dispatch system was targeted, and security and antivirus programs initially detected the attack, but then employees were instructed to not use their computers as a precautionary measure, and the CAD system was brought back online shortly after the attack was confirmed. Remza Health is investigating the extent of the cyber attack, and it remains unclear whether any patient or employee data was compromised. So it's an interesting little scenario playing out here. It's an organization of 367 people, so not a super big business by any stretch. And they do about $26.5 million a year in annual revenue. It's just interesting to me because it almost sounds like one of those situations where they're kind of boasting about the fact that they got back up quickly, yet they have no idea what was breached in the first place.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I thought you were reading it wrong, but I'm reading it here too. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. That like you say not to use it out of abundance of caution, and then all of a sudden they're using it, and then now here we are reading this article.
Right. So there was a breach. The systems that were impacted, they don't really know the full extent, but hey, our systems are back up and running. It's odd.
Yeah.
I'm going to say stay tuned on that one.
Yeah. Was it pressure from the top or just incompetence from the IT person?
I'm just going to say, hopefully they don't get hit again. SimonMed Imaging, a large radiology practice. I think we talked about this one already. Oh no, I'm on the wrong one. My bad. Insight Partners. I got to pull up the right one here, buddy. Give me 1 sec. So Insight Partners, it's an interesting one. It's a venture capital firm, and they were a victim of a cyber breach last month, and the firm is still assessing the extent of the damage, as we talked about in the last article as well. And the incident has raised significant concerns, Andre, due to the firm's extensive portfolio, particularly in our world, the cybersecurity sector. The cyber attack occurred in January of 2025, and they've notified their portfolio companies and limited investors via email. They have made no public statement, and there are concerns about potential leaks of sensitive business and technological data from the fund's internal systems. And it's particularly worrying because Insight Investments invests in cybersecurity companies that develop critical security infrastructure. One of the largest investors is an Israeli high tech with investments in over 100 Israeli companies. They also invested in companies named Armis, Monday.com, Wix, Papaya Global, Optibus, and Wiz. They closed a fund recently around $12.5 billion. and they have regulatory assets under management that exceed $90 billion. So they have deep pockets. They have some names that people are probably familiar with. I know Monday.com's a popular project management tool, SaaS-based. Wix is a SaaS-based website builder type thing. So pretty popular websites. If I have a Wix site, should I be worried?
Well, it's going to be interesting because if you have a Wix site, even though you have your investment firm that, the person that's basically helping funding, you would think that just because they are the investor, that doesn't mean that they have access to the proprietary information. Like there still should be a separation. Maybe, information about their balance sheet and the profit and loss and all of that stuff about Wix. But you would hope one of the investors isn't asking the CEO, hey, send me this or send me that. And now all of a sudden this back end language and coding for Wix is now on these people's computer.
But what is possible is the whole entire organization has standardized on maybe one or two platforms and then rolled that out to the portfolio companies. That's definitely in play here.
Yeah.
Right. Where they're all using maybe a subtenant or, inside of, let's say, Oracle, right? OSI, right? The cloud-based version of Oracle. They all could be using an instance of that under the main company. And that could be at play here as to what was impacted, right? It's not just all financials a lot of time. So we will keep you updated. This one's going to be an interesting one. A venture capital company hit. Will that make venture capital organizations actually start paying attention to cybersecurity? Or is just the cost of doing business? What do you think, Andre?
I don't know, $90 billion. I would think they invest. You can't be cheap if you got $90 billion.
They don't invest. Trust me. I lived in that world. They don't invest in. They're trying to pretty up their company to spin it off to somebody else. They're not trying to spend any more money than they have to. So that's the reality. So we'll see. We'll see if that changes things when companies, maybe when this happens, your fund gets your portfolio gets devalued as a result, and maybe that'll start making people realize that we should start doing something because we don't want a cyber attack to devalue our companies. Although, as you point out, it is also on the heels of that $12.5 billion fund that they just raised money for, and we know hackers like to hit right after big monetary events or right before big monetary events. So, all right, last article as we wrap it up here. Security detection tech failing, says cyber leaders in regulated industries. So this is a kind of what I alluded to earlier about when we were talking about the ransomware groups and their ability to move quicker and why they're moving quicker. And it's because of these tools, these security detection tools that are in place. And clearly, companies who invest in these tools still get hit with ransomware, right? It's just another layer in the many layers that you need to, of defense that you need to construct to really stand and withstand a cyber attack. But as this stuff starts to get rolled out, I think part of what we're about to discuss, Andre, is going to be the people who are buying this stuff are, again, don't really understand what they're buying, and they think they're buying the tool does more than what it really does at the end of the day. And they buy one layer or two layers, and they think, oh, we're investing in cybersecurity. I've been saying this for years, that organizations are not investing enough in cybersecurity. And when you talk to companies, it's like, oh, we have great cybersecurity. We bought CrowdStrike. We bought SentinelOne. Okay, and what else are you doing? Well, that's it. That's all we need. And that's the problem. And that's why I think we're seeing the numbers we're seeing in this article. It's up on the screen. 74% of IT directors, Andre, believe that detection-based security technologies are outdated and inadequate. That's their perception of these tools. I believe it's just what I said. It's not enough. It's not that they're outdated or inadequate. Well, inadequate, I guess, means not enough, right? They're not necessarily outdated. But again, if you develop a cybersecurity tool today, it's probably outdated in 4 days.
Yeah.
Right? But inadequate, I wouldn't say the tool itself is inadequate. Your cybersecurity strategy is inadequate, especially if you believe that one tool is your silver bullet.
Right. The bad guys will always be ahead of the good guys when it comes to this. But many times, or 8 out of the 10 times when we're looking at things after the fact, it's because something was misconfigured. It's because an employee wasn't trained. I think 98% of breaches happen through emails. And are you what tool at the end of the day will be able to stop all of the emails when you're not, even if you did have a great phishing tool, but are you training your employees, or are you just relying on the tool to do that? So it's usually settings or something legacy that's on the network that causes it, not because a tool missed something.
So we talk about phishing attacks and vulnerabilities basically being the top 2 ways that cyber criminals get access to organizations. Well, a new threat has emerged, and it is equal to, and I would almost look at this as phishing attacks, but it's probably called out in its own kind of line item now. But it's compromised access credentials. And that's not necessarily stuff spilling over in the dark web. It's your employees being socially engineered to give up their credentials. And that is at the same level as phishing attacks and exploited vulnerabilities at this point. And I'll tell you right now, that's what we're seeing. The employees and the customers that we support are just under attack with their information and different ways that cyber criminals are trying to get their hands on, say, their Microsoft 365 email address and password. And they're devising all kinds of different scams, schemes, ways to do it through email, through Teams, through social media, all different kinds of ways to get at your employees to get that information. And they're very good at doing it, and they're very good at putting up these fake sites that look like they're Microsoft and engineering them in a way that it feels like it's Microsoft. It feels like you're logging in. It feels like you're getting a 2FA code from Microsoft, but it's really all set up by cyber criminals.
Yep.
And that's how good they're getting at this stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of that last article where the company was blaming the MSP. So then you get hacked, and then you want to blame the tool and not admitting that your employees were keeping their passwords in an Excel spreadsheet or using the same password for 20 different sites.
So they're saying that organizations are shifting towards a prevention-based security. That's kind of like the way that they're seeing that we deal with this threat, right? But you can't prevent without detecting. I mean, they go hand in hand. So this whole idea of like detection tools don't work, we need to go more towards preventing, doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you need both. 78% of surveyed leaders prioritized a shift from detecting to preventing cybersecurity threats. Okay, I mean, but if those preventions fail, you need to detect, and vice versa. 33% plan to implement hard sec technology or hardening security, like zero trust, like the tools that we use that nobody likes, process control, things like that. It all sounds great on paper, Andre, right? But when you go to deploy these tools and you have a staff of one in your IT department, it doesn't play out real well. Agreed? 30% aim to adopt a consent, disarm, and reconstruction solutions. I'm going to have to dig into that one. I've never heard of it, but it sounds like the same thing I was just talking about, just using different terminology. created for the enterprise would be my guess. 27% intend to implement user activity monitoring. Interesting. Why they need to know exactly what their users are doing at all times in the name of cybersecurity is interesting to me. So we'll dig into that one a little bit, maybe in a later show. 35% of defense organizations face resistance to change and adapting new strategies. I agree with that wholeheartedly. A lot of the defense contractors we're working with through CMMC are having a real hard time with the recommendations and the things that we're telling them that they need to start doing, simply because they haven't been doing it, but they've been required to do it. And when you tell them, like, this is what this means you have to do, and you can't do what you're doing anymore, it's hard for them because they've been running these IT departments with one or two users.
Yeah.
So 39% of regulated organizations struggle to keep up with the evolving threat landscape, no doubt, right? You're not doing anything now, or you're struggling to keep up. It's only going to get harder because this stuff is moving really fast, as I think you mentioned earlier. And like they're ahead of the game than the people who are trying to defend this stuff. And finally, Andre, 36% of security professionals cite stretched budgets as a barrier for all of this cybersecurity stuff, meaning we don't have the money. Interesting to say the least. I'm not going to comment on that because I kind of talk about that a lot. And there you go. There's more evidence that organizations don't put the money required to this. And I don't believe it's because they don't have it. I believe it's a choice that they don't want to make.
Yep.
So, any final thoughts before we bounce?
It's always a calculated risk, but in my opinion, there's some things you should just do and not take the risk.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Good show. Thanks for your time today. Remember, everyone, share the show. Help us grow the channel. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Take care.